Hello, everyone, and happy virtual Focus Frostburg to you all. I'm Martin Barrett. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Recreation. Both personally and professionally, I love all things sport and physical activity. So, in this presentation, I'm going to consider where and how the physically active body and the environment meet. And, spoiler alert, it's not always a positive relationship. And I'm going to be setting this out under three main headings. First, I'll consider the body as the environment, which is represented here as just that, an active body. Second, I'll discuss the body in the environment, which is represented here as the active body inside the natural environment. And finally, I'll consider the body for the environment. And what I've tried to visualize here is the active body holding or supporting the natural environment. And together, these three interactions symbolize how the active body environment relationship is a two-way, mutually beneficial relationship. In the first section of this presentation, I'm going to be drawing less on what we understand by the natural environment and more on what we might understand as the human environment, so the way in which we as human beings function. We know that in order to survive, human bodies have basic physiological needs like clean water, clean air, and sustainable food sources. We also know that in order to maintain health and thrive, human bodies must have an enduring need for physical activity, which is more a psychologically and socially determined behavior. So together, the physiological needs and the conditions by which humans have an enduring need for physical activity create an environment conducive of transforming the living body into an active body. In other words, these are the ingredients necessary for the maintenance of a healthy bodily environment. Before the living body even considers becoming an active one, the body must have its basic physiological needs met. And on this, we start with water. We know that an adequate intake of fluid is about 15.5 cups for men and 11.5 cups for women. But we also know that during strenuous physical activity, athletes can lose 6 to 10% of their body weight in sweat loss, which necessitates an even greater intake of fluid in order to avoid dehydration. So if the active body needs to ingest water to maintain a healthy bodily environment, then a supply of water must be readily accessible. So while the active body needs access to water, the active body does not always have the capability to access clean drinking water. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, where economic growth remains below population growth, around 319 million people still don't have access to clean water, which is really most of the region. The scarcity of clean drinking water in sub-Saharan Africa is contrasted with Europe and North America, where 94% of the regional population has access to safely managed drinking water. Yet most of the water used within public drinking water systems in the US is sourced from groundwater, which, while never strictly non-renewable, has a long replenishment period of hundreds to thousands of years. So according to the Global Water Policy Project, the rate of groundwater depletion has doubled since 1960, which makes groundwater, and therefore drinking water, makes groundwater depletion a concern for many US regions, and not just the Southwest and High Plains, where demands on groundwater resources has been an issue for years. The point I'm trying to make here is that the active body is more likely to have its physiological needs met in the developed world, but that water access should not be taken for granted, and that everyone must do their part by making efforts to conserve water. Like the body's dependence with water, the body also needs food. And according to the American Dietary Guidelines, the nutritional goals for adults peak between ages 19 to 30 years. And the guideline dietary intake for adult males within this age group is anywhere from 2,200 to 3,200 calories, whereas for females the guideline is 2,000 calories. In addition to calorie intake, the American Dietary Guidelines recommend a healthy eating pattern which balances daily amounts of food across the different food groups of vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, proteins, and oils. So while sustainable food is better for the natural environment, sustainable foods are also a key ingredient of a healthy bodily environment. Now, not all populations experience a shortage of food per se, but there are still instances where the lack of desirable foods exists. According to the USDA, low food security refers to instances where populations have access to food with little or no indication of reduced intake, but where food is of reduced quality, variety, or desirability. There are two related hypotheses between low food security and obesity. First, the association is a result of the high-calorie, palatable food consumed by low food secure populations. And second, the association is a result of the limited knowledge, time, and resources that low food secure populations experience to engage in healthful eating and exercise. As a result, any scarcity in food supply, just like with a lack of access to clean drinking water, compromises the maintenance of an active body. So we've established what the active body's physiological needs are, as well as instances where these needs are met and not met. We now need to understand how the active body maintains an enduring need for physical activity. On this, I think most people understand the benefits of physical activity. For example, routine physical activity can reduce the risk of chronic disease and premature death. And to realize those benefits, most people understand the need to engage in physical activity on a daily basis. Specifically, current physical activity guidelines recommend 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. But despite awareness of the benefits of physical activity, very people are what we'd consider to be physically active. For instance, according to the 2018 National Physical Activity Plan, only 7.5% of 12 to 15-year-old youth met the National Physical Activity Guidelines. Texera and colleagues suggest physical activity motivation, or lack thereof, can be explained by two factors: self-determination and self-efficacy. The authors suggest motivations for physical activity are now diverging away from inherent interest and enjoyment of the activity toward the attainment of an outcome separable from the activity itself, so extrinsic motivation. For example, in the United States, weight loss and improved physical appearance are among the main reasons why people exercise. In terms of an individual's belief in his or her capacity to be physically active, so self-efficacy, the root of internal barriers such as shame, laziness, and fear of exercise are feelings of being too overweight to exercise. As a result, we can start to see that people have very different motivations and attitudes towards physical activity. Therefore, not all people maintain a need for physical activity, which means not all people maintain a healthy bodily environment. Instead, a healthy bodily environment is something that is socially and psychologically determined. Without the personal need and motivation for physical activity, the body's ability to sustain its status as active is ultimately challenged. Now we consider, through the body's interaction with the environment, how the environment provides access to physical activity opportunities. Such an approach is underpinned by social ecological models, which recognizes how physical activity needs are a result of dynamic interrelations between both personal and environmental factors. As such, we begin this section by discussing the interaction between water and air in the active body, before moving on to discuss the broader impacts of human action and natural resource extraction on the active body environment interaction. The active body-water interaction moves beyond the ingestion of water to the role water plays in providing access to physical activity opportunities. Specifically, water sources provide water-based physical activity opportunities for the active body, many of which take place on surface water, like lakes, rivers, and streams. Therefore, any sort of depletion of water reduces the availability of physical activities, which serves to constrain the active body. The notion that suboptimal water levels challenge the active body is supported through a study of recreational activities on Lake Hume in New South Wales, Australia, where estimates of recreational value and usage were considerably higher when the lake was near capacity. A relationship also exists between the active body and water quality. In a study of recreational waterway users in Ireland, better water quality had positive effects on water sports participants like rowers, canoers and swimmers, which was determined based on a longer trip duration. Keller and Turner developed a simple categorization of water consumption in the sport and recreation industry that demonstrates how sport uses water beyond the context of water sport participation. The figure on the left of this slide shows how water is consumed in three ways: through the field of play, consumer amenities, and maintenance and cleaning. Sports played on natural turf like soccer and rugby will consume more water through preparation and maintenance of the field of play. For example, turf should receive 1 to 2 inches of water per week during the growing season. When put into the context of a football field, at 1 inch of water per week, this amounts to approximately 60,000 gallons of water, which over the course of a typical 6-month growing season equates to approximately 1.5 million gallons. In Australia, the sport and recreation industry is considered a high water consuming industry, similar in that way to the agriculture and farming industry. Water crises in Australia, which restrict the widespread irrigation of playing fields, have led to the closure of sport and recreation facilities, which in turn has led to the cancellation of training and competition. Similar drought-like conditions in Colorado in 2013 forced the Denver Parks and Recreation Department to close grass sport fields for soccer and lacrosse for over a month. Therefore, any sort of changes to the supply or quality of water poses challenges for the active body. Such a challenge holds true regardless of whether the active body is on water or the active body is using facilities that consume water. Poor air quality also compromises and potentially negates the benefits associated with outdoor physical activity. In a Breathe GB study, researchers analysed air pollution levels at some of Britain's most popular sport training facilities across 5 cities. Of the 94 sites analysed, a total of 26 sport training facilities had particulate matter and or nitrogen dioxide levels that exceed World Health Organization limits. Of the 5 cities within the study, the most severe air pollution was measured in London, where 24 of 26 sport training facilities had air quality that did not meet the minimum WHO guidelines for air quality, which includes facilities in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, a key legacy venue from the Olympic Games in 2012. Extractive industries designed to maintain energy levels in the US grew exponentially with the advent of hydrological fracturing, commonly referred to as fracking. Industrial corporations have been threatening to overtake public parklands with fracking activities, thereby threatening public lands and opportunities for recreation on those lands. Related to the active body in parklands, Kellison and colleagues examined individual perceptions of participating in recreational activities at parks near fracking operations. And although knowledge of what exactly fracking is was low and support for energy independence was high, individuals suggested that they would not visit parks near fracking operations. Findings such as these suggest a commonly held belief among the population that something might be okay as long as it is not in my own backyard. The third and final section of this presentation discusses how the active body serves the environment by establishing the relationship between the active body and pro-environmental attitudes and philanthropic efforts. It's important to note that the active body can damage the natural environment. As such, recreation ecology, so the study of the environmental consequences of outdoor recreation and nature-based tourism activities and their effective management, has become a field of increasing importance. For example, Pickering and Hill suggest recreation and related tourism in Australian protected areas has both direct and indirect negative impacts on plant biodiversity and vegetation. The direct impacts relate to the clearing of vegetation for infrastructure and damage from trampling caused by outdoor pursuits like hiking and mountain biking. Despite how recreation disturbs the environment, an association does exist between outdoor physical activity and pro-environmental attitudes. Beery evidences how participants engaged in regular nature-based outdoor recreation show a significantly higher level of environmental connectedness than non-regular nature-based outdoor recreation participants. For example, in a more recent study, Cunningham, McCullough and Hohensee found as physical activity rates and access to physical activity increased, so too did people's beliefs that climate change impacted them personally. Water charities, which exist for the purpose of raising funds to provide clean drinking water to those in developing countries, have emerged due in part to the failures of governmental policies and privatization efforts to sufficiently address the global water crisis. A variety of efforts are undertaken by water charities to raise funds for water projects in developing nations. Presently, community-based running events are fast becoming one of the most popular fundraising event options for water charities, which has been coined as embodied or fitness philanthropy. Participants in events like Run for Water take the act of using one's body for the benefit of others to tap into and build on social networks of friends and donors, thereby reinforcing their social status as one that does good for others and allowing them to build a new social network with like-minded donors and fundraisers. This presentation sought to distinguish between the body as the environment, the body in the environment, and the body for the environment. And in doing so, we recognize how the body as the environment is largely determined by the environment in which the body exists. Likewise, the body in the environment is influenced by the body's connectedness to and attitude toward the environment. The physically active body does not and cannot simply become physically active. There are socio-political and individual factors that allow for the movement of the body. Concurrently, those same factors influence the environment and the processes by which the environment-body nexus occurs. So to understand the body and environment, one must understand both in totality. It is about the food we eat, the water we drink, the bodily acts we perform, and the processes by which these performances are allowed and prescribed to occur. It's not enough to suggest that climates change, that bodies influence that change. Now more than ever, there needs to be clear discussion for that change. I encourage you to think about how you are constrained or empowered to be physically active as a result of your interaction and relationship with the environment. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. For example, I've cited a number of sources in this presentation, and if you'd like some more information on one or more of these, then please send me an email. Thanks for listening.